Hello everyone, I am Abdul Muiz Ahmed and today we are going to start off with the second chapter of our textbook, that is personal identity. And for the ease of understanding, I have divided this chapter into parts and we would be starting off with the first part, that is part number 2.1. In this part we would be understanding some definitions and certain basic concepts that are needed to understand the rest of the chapter. All right, so now let's move on to our learning objectives, and at the end of this lecture you would be able to define identity or identification along with its types. You would be able to describe meaning of identification of a living person, as well as of identification of a dead person. You would be able, and finally you would be able to define the term corpus delicti. Okay, so now moving on to the first concept, let's start. So yeah, identity or identification. So as you can see the name of the chapter, it's personal identity. So you need to understand the name of the chapter in order to guess what would be you would be seeing there in the rest of the chapter. All right, so personal means of a person, of an individual, and identity means the characteristics that make up the person. All right, the characteristics or the things that make, or the features that make up the person, that characterizes that person only. So this same thing is written in the definition as well, that identity or identification basically refers to determination or establishment of individuality of a person. Either that person could be living or that person could be dead. Okay, so now types of identity. So there are two types of identity or two types of identification. Okay, one is complete and other one is partial, and the names are basically giving away the answer, that complete identity in basically refers to absolute fixation of the individuality. You would be finding out possible all the necessary features or characteristics of the person. Okay, and in partial identity you are only going to ascertain some facts while the other ones will remain unknown because of any reason. Okay, for example, because of the lack of time or because of lack of resources, you won't be able to find out the remaining facts about that person. All right, so that would be categorized as partial identity. So in this part you need to understand what do you mean by identity or identification. You need to understand the the name of the chapter. If you are able to understand the name of the chapter, then you would be able to guess what's coming, and you would be able to easily understand what would be coming in the rest of the chapter. All right, and you need to understand the types of identity as well. You just should remember that what are the types of identity. All right, now moving on to our next part and second part, that is identification of a living person. So in identification of a living person, and in the third part, that is identification of a dead person, you need to remember two things basically. First of all, who carries out that identification, and secondly some examples in which it is carried out. All right, so identification of a living person is basically carried out by police. Alright, it is primarily a matter of police investigation. Police would be carrying out the identification of a living person. And in what cases do you see that identification of a living person is carried out? Okay, for there are certain civil cases and there are some criminal cases. Okay, as examples. Okay, so in civil cases you have got inheritance claims, marriage, pension, etc. For example, someone comes and he claims inheritance. Okay, he or she claims inheritance. So in order to identify that person is correctly claiming the inheritance, or that person actually belongs to the family. Okay, so identification of that living person would be carried out by police. Okay, and in certain criminal cases, like in case of assault, rape, or murder, okay, identification of the living person who has carried out these things, okay, would be done by police. Okay, so in these civil cases, in these criminal cases, in these examples, identification of a living person is being carried out, and that is being carried out by police. It is primarily a matter of police investigation. So you need to remember these two points about identification of a living person. Same goes for identification of a dead person. You need to remember two parts. That firstly, who would be carrying out identification of a dead person? You. A medical man, a medical legal officer is mainly concerned with identification of dead person, and examples in which it is necessary include all those scenarios, all those cases in which a dead body is involved. For example, homicide. For example, mishaps like fire, air crash, explosion. For example, in cases of decomposed, mutilated bodies, and in cases of scattered remains. Okay, all of these involve dead person. All of these involve a dead body. All of these involve dead body remains. All right. So those, in order to identify that whose remains are these, whose dead body is this, a medical man would be there. Okay, and he would be concerned with identification of dead person. So just to summarize, identification of a living person is carried out by police. Identification of a dead person is carried out by medical men. Examples in which identification of a living person is involved include certain civil cases like of inheritance claim, marriage, and in certain criminal cases like of assault, rape, murder. Identification of a dead person is carried out in all those scenarios in which a dead body is involved. For example, homicide, mishaps, decomposed and mutilated bodies, and in cases where scattered remains are found. All right. So this is all about identification of a living person and identification of a dead person. Now, finally, moving on to the last part of our lecture, that is corpus delicti. Okay, you need to understand this term. It comes um in viva, it comes in exams. Okay, so you need to remember this as well vividly, that what is corpus delicti, and there are many ways to remember it. Okay, so first of all, you need to understand what is the meaning of the words that are present in this term. Corpus basically means body, and delicti means of the offense. So it basically refers to body of the offense. All right, this is really easy to remember. Okay, corpus, as you all know, means body, and delicti is a new word. Just remember its meaning. Its meaning is of the offense. So body of the offense. Offense basically crime in simple words. So this term refers to body of the offense and in charge of homicide, and it includes two things. Okay, for example, whenever there is a crime, whenever there is an offense, for example, there is an homicide, so there would be a person who would be accused, who would be in charge of that homicide, and there would be a dead body of, and that dead body is basically called body of the offense. The body of the offense basically refers to the body on which the offense has been committed, on which the crime has been committed. All right, and in order to establish corpus delicti, you need to do two things. It includes two things. First of all, positive identification of the body. You need to identify the body, you need to identify the dead person. Okay, who is this dead person? You need to identify his name, his background, his race, his language, everything about him. You need to establish the identity of the person. Okay, and then secondly, you need to prove that death is because of a criminal act that has been done by the accused. Okay, that has been done by by the one who is in charge of the homicide. So you need to prove that as well. You need to rule out that its death is not because of a heart attack, its death is not because of a seizure, its death is not because of a stroke, its death is not because of any natural reason, its death is because of that person who is in charge of homicide, the accused one. Okay, if you do these two things, then you have established corpus delicti. All right, and finally, in order to remember corpus delicti, you need to understand its importance as well. You need to keep in mind its importance as well. Just take a scenario. Okay, just take an example. For example, someone comes to you with bones, okay, or with portions of a dead body, and just to carry out his or her rivalry against someone, that person accuses someone else, okay, for the dead body, for the bones, okay, and just for the sake of rivalry. So what you need to do, you need to establish corpus delicti in it, in this case. Okay, you need to rule out the false charge. All right, so this is the importance of corpus delicti, that accurate identification is mandatory for establishment of corpus delicti after homicide, since unclaimed bodies first, second portions of dead body, and third bones are sometimes brought forward to just support false charge. Okay, so this is the importance of corpus delicti. So if someone asks you in viva, if someone asks you in exam that what is corpus delicti, so you need, first thing that should come into your mind are the meaning of the words, that what is corpus, what is delicti. Once you have established this in your mind, then you can move on to the definition, and you can move on to the two things that are included in corpus delicti, or you could just simply remember it by this way: there are two words, so there are two things in it. Okay. And finally, the importance of it. If you remember the importance of it, if you understand the importance of it, you would be easily able to explain it to the examiner as well. All right, so this is about corpus delicti. Okay, so this covers our entire lecture. If you have any comments, if you have any feedback, so do give it in the comment box. That's all about it. Thank you so much. Take care. Goodbye.